Ammon Bundy for governor.
Hello, everybody. I'm Congressman Ron Paul. I'm calling in behalf of Ammon Bundy, who is running for governor in Idaho. He's doing very well, and he's a friend of liberty. He's a strict constitutionalist, and I know he would make a great governor.
Well, I first of all am just humbled to be here, humbled to be able to reach people this way. It's amazing what God has given us in technology and ability to communicate. I don't think that has been given to us by chance. I believe that it's a blessing to us. It could also be a curse. It's a double-edged sword, but it certainly is a blessing when we use it right. And so, I mean, how could I stand right here and reach hundreds of people out, who knows where you're at, mostly in Idaho, but not necessarily all in Idaho. In fact, why don't you tell me right here where you're at? Tell me where you're at. Give me a, okay, Star, Meridian, West Boise, Tim's in, whoa, this is happening so fast, it's awesome. Meridian, Twin Falls, John's in Twin Falls, Helen's in, well, I went so fast, I can't even tell. It's awesome though. That means a lot of you are out there listening. Gary's in Cascade, Tracy's in Ola, Heidi's in Boise. So it sounds like, you know, we're all over. Is anybody out of the state? Oh, there's somebody in Nicholas is in Montana. So there we go. There's one person out of the state. But anyway, thank you for being here. I also want to give a special thanks to Dr. Ron Paul. He's someone I greatly respect. And long before anything had happened to my family, as far as, you know, the federal government coming after my family, long before that, I was introduced to Ron Paul by my brother Ryan. And he introduced us to basically everybody, or he introduced Ron Paul to my family. And anyway, Ron Paul has taught us a lot. And I would encourage you to go to his videos, go find out who he is. If you don't know who he is, I hope you know who he is. He's been a tremendous blessing to this country. And he, for decades and decades, has fought for true principles in the U.S. Congress, in other positions. And he has educated millions and millions of people on true principles of freedom. And his heart is good. And he's a doctor. He understands things. I know that, you know, that he just is a very wise and intelligent man. And I am humbled to have his endorsement. It means, you know, more to me than probably anybody else's endorsement that I could get in the country, because of what he's done and what he stands for and the knowledge. So I'm grateful that he would put his name with mine, and I hope that it shows you who I am as well, and we can together do a lot of good. So thank you, Dr. Ron Paul. All right, I'm going to get, we got a lot to cover. I look forward to interacting with you. Again, I got a lot of buttons here. This is my second time doing this. I'm excited. Hopefully we could pull it off without too much problems. But if there are problems, they're probably going to be my problems. So I'm just warning you, you know, probably because I'll push the wrong button or I'll do something like that. So I'm just warning you, because it's an amazing place and facility that we are able to do this at. And this equipment is tremendous. So let's go first of all to what my presentation is, because I promised that I would get into public school, the history, challenges, and solutions. And we're going to interact, so, you know, get your questions ready. I might, in between, talk about or take some questions or thoughts. And of course, you can shoot me a question here. I'm just going to continue to look over here. Okay, so it sounds like we're going to have to do the interactions on chat mostly, because we're having a little bit of trouble right now. We might be able to fix it with actually bringing people up. So let's talk about the history of education. And I'm going to go on here for quite a while because I want people to understand what the history of public education, the history of education in the United States has been. So education in America has passed through two distinct cycles. The first cycle lasted about 280 years, and it was, it was, hey, Diego, which one am I showing here? I apologize. Okay, we're good. And it lasted about 280 years. It started in 1607, and it went approximately to 1887. So the most remarkable aspect of the first cycle of education was a goal of excellence in education almost from the earliest colonial period. By 1646, a total of 130 graduates from Oxford, Cambridge, and Dublin University had immigrated to America. That's something, I just found out through my research. The strict discipline in education preparation for professional life is described by John Adams. And this is very interesting. It talks about how he talks about how his son was educated, John Quincy Adams. So by the time he was 18, he said the youth had become fairly proficient in Latin, French, and Greek. He has also studied English and French literature, many of the Greek classics, Roman, English, and Greek history, the theorems of Euclid, plane trigonometry, algebra, decimals and fractions, geometry, proportions, and conic sections. Let me get back here. I'm going to put this all the way up. However, John Adams said his son was still a little weak in calculus. Now, by 1700, the demand of parents in Boston for books they could use in the home to train their children resulted in printers putting out over 130 editions of spelling books and 332 different primary readers. So that's quite a few books where we're talking about the 1700s, just for mostly for parents. Home education was so common in America that most children knew how to read before they were 4 years old. Now, thousands of private schools sprung up. These were truly people's schools. This is a quote that I found in one of the records. The private system of education in which our forefathers were educated included home, schools, churches, voluntary associations, circulating libraries, apprenticeship, and self-study. These remained the bulk word of American education until the early 1900s. Okay? By 1836, William Holmes McGuffey began publishing his famous McGuffey Readers. Raise your hand if anybody's heard of the McGuffey Readers. Okay, there's a few, quite a few. Okay, so awesome. We got a whole bunch of people on this event. We're so excited to have everybody. So nearly every child in America was studying from one or more of them, the McGuffey Readers. By 1920, there was over 120 million copies of the McGuffey Reader in print. These readers consisted of basics in reading, writing, arithmetic, literature, art forms, history, geography, hygiene, and civics. There was a strong emphasis during the first cycle on spiritual values, together with the mandates of morality and the qualities needed to develop strong character. There were frequent references to the Ten Commandments, the Golden Rule, and popular Bible stories were stressed throughout the McGuffey Readers. So I'll give you a little bit of, here's a collection of them. Oh, I got to go back to my, so here's a collection of the McGuffey Readers right here. You get a little visual of them. This is what America learned from. This is what they learned from. And also, they also learned from a book that some of you may be familiar with, the Blueback Speller. It's pretty neat. We were looking through this earlier, Diego and I. They also, of course, read the Bible and learned how to read and write by reading and copying the Bible. Now, Diego, I just can't read that. It's too small, so I apologize. We were gonna give you a definition of a Noah's. Okay, yeah, there we go. Diego's giving me direction here. Okay, so, all right, we're going to bring, so here was a definition of today's. I just can't read that, Diego, and I apologize. We were going to bring up a definition of marriage today, and then the definition of marriage in the Noah Webster 1828. Oh, there we go. Sorry. Got it right here on the side. I am going to go here where you can kind of see me. Okay, I can read it. Diego just has to train me a little better. So marriage in today's definition, it says the relationship that exists between two people who are united as spouses, the state of being married. That's the definition today of marriage. Now, let's look at what the children were learning that we find in these books. And this is the Webster Dictionary 1828, and this is the definition of marriage there. And it says to marry, and it says the act of uniting a man and a woman for life, wedlock, the legal union of a man and a woman for life. Marriage is a contract, both civil and religious, by which the parties engage to live together in mutual affection and fidelity till death shall separate them. Marriage was instituted by God Himself for the purpose of preventing the promiscuous intercourse of the sexes, for promoting domestic facility, and for securing the maintenance, I got to move my body here, and education of children. Can you see the difference? The difference between the definition now and the definition of back in the 1828s? It's amazing. And this is what our children and the people were learning. This is what were in our books. So let's go on here. All right. Now, the first cycle, let's go click here. Okay, the first cycle of education also laid great stress on the need to improve and perpetuate the American economy and political system. In 1831, Alex Tocqueville came to the United States to study the American system. Get you down here. Here's what he had to say about the importance of education. It cannot be doubted that in the United States, the instruction of people powerfully contribute to the support of the democratic republic, and such must always be the same. I believe where the instructions which enlighten the understanding is not separate from the moral education. So it was the same. De Tocqueville recognized the importance of the moral foundation which Americans attribute to their success formula. He interviewed Americans at every level of society and wrote this: if you question him, an American, respecting his country, he will inform you what his rights are and by what means he exercises them. You'll find that he is familiar with the mechanisms of law. The American learns to know the law by participating in the acts of legislation. The great work of society is ever going on before his eyes, and as it were, under his hands. In the United States, politics are the end of the aim of education. So he's clearly explaining to us here that the average American, and he spent several years in America, he was from France, spent several years in America interviewing all different types of people in all different societies. And this is what his statement was, that they knew what their rights were. They knew how to exercise them, by what means to exercise them. They knew the law. They participated in the law and legislation. They were very active in their government. And in fact, he even says that he believed that the United States politics are the end and aim of education. De Tocqueville was particularly astonished by the knowledge that children possess concerning the Constitution and how the American system operated. Many of the children were studying a little book of questions and answers called the Catechism on the Constitution. It was written by Arthur J. Stansbury and was published in 1828. Now, the American success formula was so effective that by 1905, the United States had become the foremost productive nation in the world. It was still a teeny nation with less than 6% of the Earth's population. However, it was producing over half of the world's developed wealth, over half of all the food, clothes, houses, cars, telephones, etc. We were producing, imagine that, 6% of the world's population was producing over 50% of the world's goods, the world's developed wealth. So only as other nations followed the same formula were they able to share in the significant percentage of these abundant goods and services. So America was an example. The United States was an example to the rest of the world. And those that followed the example and applied the principles of the success formula that was put forth by our founders, they also saw the same success. Now, once the American success formula had been developed and put into operation, the biggest challenge was to perpetuate it from generation to generation. Gradually, public schools enter the picture. The public school concept was launched almost from the beginning. However, private schools continued to fill education requirements almost entirely throughout the colonial period. Even as late as 1860, there were only 300 public schools in the United States as compared to 6,000 private academies. The second cycle of education began around 1887, give or take a few years, when a new push in education began to emerge. So here we go. Right at the time when the American success formula was reaching its peak, four powerful groups demanded significant change in the system. Their ideas eventually infiltrated most educational circles. So the first powerful group was the populist movement, which demanded that the federal government use income taxes to confiscate some of the property of the rich and redistribute it among the lower economic classes. The second was the wealthy and industrial financial leaders who wanted the federal government, under their influence, to take a more forcible role in regulating the economy and circulating competition both at home and abroad. The third was a group of economists and political leaders who were intrigued by the theories of socialism, which called for government ownership or control of the major means of production and distribution. The fourth was a group of leading intellectuals who rejected the spiritual and moral foundation of the American formula and wanted it eliminated from education. So, sound familiar, right? Sound familiar? We've been through this, right? We've been going through this. This is not something that's new. These ideas have been something that have, been rooted over 100 years in this country. Now, by the founding fathers had pronounced all of these ideas failure formulas and warned that such theories were destructive to the American system. Over a period of time, the standards of values which were basic in the first cycle of education became seriously eroded. The disciplines emphasized in the McGuffey Readers era began to be phased out in favor of a more loosely structured requirements. This began to have a negative impact on the quality of education in America. By 1983, so that, that's, most of us are alive now by then. Maybe there's some younger people on here and you weren't alive, but I was alive by then. By 1983, 5 independent studies by leading educators across the country began calling for a return to the basics. A report from the National Commission on Excellence in Education declared, this is what they said, quote, "The educational foundation of our society are presently being eroded by a rising tide in mediocrity that threatens our very future as a nation and people." The findings of the Commission included serious dangers and signals such as some 23 million American adults were functionally illiterate by the simplest test of everyday reading, writing, and comprehension. Remember, compared that to most of the children being able to read at age 4. About 13% of all 17-year-olds in the United States were considered functionally illiterate. And it's worse now. This was a report in 1983. It's worse now. Businesses and military leaders complained that they were required to spend millions of dollars on costly remedial education and training programs in such basic skills as reading, writing, spelling, and computation. The Department of Navy reported this. This is interesting. 25% of recent recruits cannot read at the 9th grade level, the minimum level needed simply to understand written safety instructions. Without remedial work, they cannot even begin, much less complete, the sophisticated training essential in much of the modern military. So, I mean, they were having all kinds of trouble because they couldn't find anybody. Well, I shouldn't say that, but 25% of their recruits couldn't even read to the level that they needed them to operate military equipment and to understand the safety features. So analyst Paul Copperman pointed out that before our day, each generation of Americans has outstripped its parents in education, in literacy and economic attainment. For the first time in history of our country, the educational skills of one generation will not surpass, will not equal, will not even approach those of their parents. It was found that dropouts from education system between 9th and 12th grade ran from 20 to 45%. During the second cycle, there is a serious decline in moral and social quality of the American culture. There is a tremendous increase in crime, particularly in crimes of violence. The first time in history, more than 1 million families were broken up by divorce each year. Government reports also indicated that for the first time, there were more babies in gestation destroyed by abortion than babies born alive. Promiscuous sexuality among teenagers and even among children created a whole new syndrome of unwed mothers, illegitimate children, and grave social destabilization, which resulted from these problems. All right, so let me get back here. So I'm going to keep going. Sexual depravity in some of the most bizarre forms began to be widespread. The filthy speech movement was promoted in the name of free speech. Soon, four-letter words became a prominent part of the routine conversation for many people, including and particularly in schools. The First Amendment was used as an excuse to sell, distribute, and broadcast pornography nationwide. For the first time in American history, obscenity became a principal attraction for commercial exploitation in books, magazines, films, and television shows. Addictive and sometimes brain-damaging drugs became a plague on the nation. Schools became infested with drugs and drug pushers. Some adults, even from the most sophisticated segment of a society, began to indulge frequently in drugs. America made up at this point now, America made up about 6% of the world's population, 5 to 6% of the world's population, but consumed 75% of the world's illegal drugs and 50% of the world's legal drugs. A strong cry was mounted to completely secularize all phases of public education. The United States Supreme Court eliminated prayer and Bible reading from the public school for reasons which would have been completely incomprehensible to the Founding Fathers. The teachers of spiritual values and moralities were eliminated from the responsibility of schools teaching these principles, even made illegal. Stories with moral lessons, which were so popular in the McGuffey readers, disappeared from the textbooks. The drastic drop in stories with moral lessons is reflected in a special study of fourth grade readers between 1810 and 1950. I want to show you this report. So out of each 25 pages, the following emphasized a moral lesson. So you can see here in 1810, in these readers, out of 25 pages, there was 16 references, a little over 16 references to moral lessons. In 1830, it rose a little bit to 16.75. In 1850, it dropped to 12.42. So there was 12.42 pages out of 25 that taught a moral lesson. In 1870, there was 6.0. In 1890, there was 4.19. 1910, 4.5. 1930, 1.0. And 1950, 0.06. And now it's probably just not, it's illegal probably. I mean, I'm just saying that, but it's, you know, the way we've been going, it's probably illegal to teach most of the lessons. So, all right. The second cycle of education was much less committed to basic principles of the Constitution or the founding formulas for prosperity. The Constitution began to be called outdated. Volumes began to be written about the Founding Fathers, which levied serious charges against their reputation. Researchers are now finding these stories to be myths and largely of recent invention. The power base of government was shifted from strong local government to an increasingly powerful federal government. The whole constitutional structure was designed to prevent big government from happening, but the shift of power from the state to the central government involved numerous violations of the Constitution. Can we see the progression of and what has brought us to where we're at now? Are we starting to see how we've got in the position where we're at right now? There was also a shift from a free market economy to a highly regulated economy. This further violates the Constitution. The nation went from a very low tax nation to extremely high taxes. During the second cycle of the United States entered into various entanglements and alliances, and one way or another began meddling in the affairs of nearly every nation on the face of the earth. It was done with the best of intentions, but failed in its goal to, in spite of hundreds of billions of dollars which were extracted from the American taxpayer, to pay the bill. The United States went from virtually no national debt to the biggest national debt in history. In fact, it has reached the point where the national debt of the United States has become more than the debt of all the rest of the countries of the world combined. American soldiers are ordered to fight abroad in undeclared wars such as those in Korea and Vietnam. This is prohibited by Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. The executive branch began issuing thousands of executive orders each year, which are enforced by the courts as federal law. The Constitution provides in Article 1, Section 1, that Americans are not to be subject to any laws which had not been approved by their representatives in Congress. Yet we see today Biden and every other president and every other governor just issuing executive orders like they're kings. And that is contrary to the Constitution. The nation was taken off the gold standard without constitutional amendment, and now secular education has become so strong that perverse immorality and sexual depravity has become mandatory curriculums in the classroom. So it's brought us to where we're at now. So Diego, will you run the teacher and the flag and give these good people a little bit of an example of what's going on?
Okay, so during third period we have announcements and they do the Pledge of Allegiance. I always tell my class, stand if you feel like it, don't stand if you feel like it, say the words if you want, don't have to say the words. So my class decided to stand but not say the words. Totally fine. Except for the fact that my room does not have a flag. It used to be there, but I took it down during COVID because it made me uncomfortable. And I packed it away and I don't know where, and I haven't found it yet. But my kid today goes, hey, it's kind of weird that we just stand and then, we say it to nothing. And I'm like, oh, well, I gotta find it. Like, I'm working on it. I got you. In the meantime, I tell this kid, we do have a flag in the class that you can pledge your allegiance to. And he looks around, he goes, oh, that one?
So there you have it. Just the opposite of what we were founded upon. Just the opposite of what our education was, and now it's become a way for them to basically teach and influence our children to their beliefs, which is actually I'm going to cover here a little bit. So let's go on to and talk about the let's see, I can't get my presentation to come up, Diego. Okay, there we go. Awesome. So, principles of children's education. I think it's very important because we're going to talk about the solution. We've already talked about the history. We've identified some of the problems. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but then we're going to talk about the solution in Idaho, right? Because we have to change this. We have to do something. We can't just be complacent. We have to act so that we don't continue down this road of destruction, because these things will destroy us, and they have destroyed our liberty up to this point. So, principles of children's education. First of all, you can't talk about this without talking about the Bible. I'm going to read you this, or at least part of it. It says, the Bible and America both enjoy unprecedented success. The Bible is the best-selling book of all times. It has sold hundreds of millions of copies worldwide and has been the best-selling book in America for centuries. No other book is comparable. Similarly, America is unrivaled in its success. Born in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence, she has had only one form of government since the U.S. Constitution was ratified in 1789. Neither our closest allies nor our fiercest enemies have experienced the stability with which we have been blessed. The accomplishments of both America and the Bible are unmatched but not unrelated. For the Bible was the key factor in American success, a fact largely unknown today, but widely acknowledged by national leaders throughout American history. For example, I've got a couple here. This is from Ronald Reagan. Of the many influences that have shaped the United States of America into a distinctive nation and people, none may be said to be more fundamental and enduring than the Bible. President Woodrow Wilson, America was born to exemplify that devotion to the elements of righteousness, which are derived from the relation of Holy Scripture. Now, so I am going to go to the Bible to determine, to understand, I think we all need to go there to understand the principles of children's education. Now in Deuteronomy 6:6-7, it says, and these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit at your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. Psalms 127:3, train up your child in the way he shall go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Deuteronomy 4:19, or Psalms 127:3, behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Now, Deuteronomy 4:9, only take care and keep your souls diligently, lest you forget the things that your eyes have seen, and lest they depart from your heart all the days of your life. Make them known to your children and your children's children. So whose responsibility is it to teach their children from God, from God's Word? Who has the responsibility? It is clearly the responsibility of the parent, and that children are a heritage unto the Lord. So another question, at what age is child's most impressionable? Here's one report from Reference. It says, children up to the age of 8 are the most impressionable. Up to this point, they cannot distinguish what is seen on television or in video games from reality. They often imitate what they see, believe. They believe in the monsters, that monsters are real. People can have superpowers. To ensure that children have positive experiences and learn the difference between a game or a show and what happens in real life, parents must pay attention. I agree with that. Now, interesting enough, here's another study from Archive of Research that says something a little different, but I think it goes along with what we're trying to understand here. Very young children are not nearly as impressionable as older children. So that's kind of opposite. They said in the Reference magazine, it said that the younger children up to 8 are most impressionable. This one says that the older ones are more impressionable. The higher development of mental facilities is an indispensable, that's a typo there, I got a few of these, prerequisite for impressionability. We can therefore safely assume that the earlier a person places some impressive experience in his childhood, the more likely it is to be a fantastic and regressive one. Deeper impressions are to be expected only from experience in late childhood. So the interesting thing about this is basically saying that, you know, if you have something that really impresses you or that is impactful in your life in your earlier childhood, it's easier to overcome than when it is impressed upon you in your preteens or late teens, in your older childhood. And that makes sense to me, but these two reports are very interesting. But what they do say, and what they do agree with, is that up to 18 years old is the most impressionable years of life. So I ask the question here. So if 18 years old is the most impressionable years in life, then isn't it vital for the survival of any society or our society to protect the influence upon children during these years? Right? Give me a thumbs up if you think about that. I mean, does that make sense, right? That if children are most impressionable, and they're most impressionable up to 18 years old, then in order to save society, in order to save our children, our freedom, our liberty, and all of that, we have to protect the influence upon our children during these years, right? So what did God institute to make sure a child is protected during these most impressionable years? Now, Diego, is our chat working here? Okay, so who can tell me, what did God institute to make sure a child is protected during the most impressionable years? Right? Give me a shot here. Okay, I'm not seeing it feed here, Diego. Okay, I'm gonna move on because I think most of you guys would probably agree with me and probably put it in the chat. We'll get that going here in just a sec. But it is the family, right? Thumbs down if you don't think it's the family. Thumbs up if you think it's the family. Right? God instituted the family to protect children during these most impressionable years. And who did God charge responsible to protect a child during these most impressionable years? Well, that would be the parents, right? Of course. So he put two, adults that are, maybe they don't have everything figured out. They're not perfect, but he put them in charge of these most impressionable years of a child's life. And he put them in a family where they can work together and they can protect themselves. So interesting enough, these years are also the years children are in public school. Now, I am going to bring something up here. Now, I want to talk about a word, but I want you to think about it a little different, okay? We're going to talk about wicked. But let's throw religion out in the sense, yeah, it's working now. The feed is working now, Diego. Okay, so let's just look at that. So wicked, by definition here, and it's pretty close to the definition in the 1828 Webster Dictionary as well. Morally very bad, evil, causing or likely to cause harm, distress, or trouble. So if that is wicked, that's what the definition of wicked is, then wouldn't, and if wicked people are, get back here, apologize, I'm learning these buttons. Okay, if wicked, so remember wicked, if wicked people wanted to influence and change an entire society, what would be the most effective way for them to do it? Put it in the chat. If wicked people wanted to influence and change an entire society, that's right. Someone says, Lacey says target children. Josh says kids. Shannon says schools. Okay. Wendy says prison camps. Nicholas says control over impressionable minds. Yeah, so that's exactly right. The wicked would want to influence children when they're most impressionable, so that they can, impact them and impact their entire lives and impact a society for what they want, for their wicked purposes. So, of course, wouldn't it not be to find a way to teach and influence children at ages up to 18? Now, but the problem is, for the wicked, is God put into place parents and families to make sure that that doesn't happen, right? That's what God put into place. He put parents and he put a family in place to make sure that the wicked can't just come in, dance their way in, and influence these impressionable minds. So we as parents are not just going to let any wicked person come into our children's lives, into our homes, and teach our children wicked things, right? We're not going to do that. Are we doing that? We need to ask ourselves. We shouldn't be doing that. That is our responsibility, to protect our children from the wicked. From the wicked, which is, what is the wicked here? The wicked is, again, get to it here, morally very bad, evil, causing or likely to cause harm and distress. So we're not going to just let them have their way with our children. We're going to make sure we protect them. So wicked people have a problem. They have a huge problem because God created an institution to protect children during their most influential years. And so they in order for them to influence children, they have to find a way and to find a place to influence children without parents being present. And in our society, right now, where is that possible? Put it in the chat right here. Where is it possible for wicked people to influence our children without us being there, without parents and really the family being there? Okay, I got schools. I've got schools. I got television. That's great. Public schools, in the classroom, work possibly, work in children care, social media, movies. Yeah, these are awesome. That is correct. That is absolutely correct. Where they could either come into our home and we don't block the wickedness, or we actually send our children out to public schools where they have full access to them for hours and hours to influence them without us being there. Okay, now so there's a, okay, so let's talk about some of the things that are being taught in public school. Diego, can we go to video 2? So does this make sense to everybody? Again, thumbs up if it's making sense to, I'm just talking very clearly about the reality of life, about the reality of our responsibility as parents, about the influential years of our children's life, and how we have been charged to protect them. We've been charged to protect them. So let's, we're going to go to some videos here, but I'm going to continue on because I want to talk about public school expenses. Okay, so we've talked about the history. We've talked about some of the dangers. And just let me know when you have those videos, Diego. Yeah, go. So we're going to back up. Let's go to this video and then go right into video number 3 too.
Across the nation, schools are starting to introduce sexual orientation and gender education into their school's curriculum. This includes books about transgender children, sex education as early as first grade, using genderless pronouns in class, and other practices which in some situations leave parents powerless. I am now joined by Emily Gao, Director of Heritage's DeVos Center for Religion and Civil Society. My first question for you is, do children as young as 4 or 5 know their gender identity?
Children who are as young as 4 or 5 do not know their gender identity. And especially at that age, children are just beginning to learn about the world and to learn about what is fact and what is fiction, or what is a myth, or what is a fairy tale. And children at that age are not really able to distinguish, oftentimes, between what is a fact and what is imagination. And so that's why we're particularly concerned about them being taught things that are not factual, things like gender identity, or through ideas like the gender unicorn or the genderbread person, because they can't tell the difference between fact and what is a myth.
So, what are the consequences of teaching children in K through 8 about gender identity and what it means to be transgender?
Well, we've seen in states that have adopted transgender curriculum for young children that the effects have been quite alarming. Children have become very confused about their sex. They have come home to their parents in tears over being taught that they could be trapped in the wrong body. That is a myth. Nobody's trapped in the wrong body. While it's one thing for adults to, express that they are uncomfortable with, certain aspects of their sex, of their bodies, it's a totally different thing to instruct children that they could be trapped in the wrong body. That is creating confusion that is very harmful to them.
So, should parents have a say over what their children learn in public schools?
Absolutely. Parents should have a say over what their children learn in public schools, but the problem is that right now we have states that are passing laws that include instruction about sexual orientation and gender curriculum that are in subjects like history, and there's no opt-out for parents. So parents are being cut out of the process of determining what their children learn in school.
So imagine your innocent children being taught about the genderbread man, or whatever they call him, or the gender unicorn, and being taught by people that they might be trapped in their own body, that God made a mistake, that He didn't make them the way they really are, or that there isn't even a God, of course, but that they're a mistake. Imagine your most impressionable children thinking these things. And this is what's being taught in our schools. This is actually curriculum that's being pushed. And there's a huge, I want to say this, there's a huge, push and outcry about critical race theory. Well, why are we in the critical race theory battle? Well, because we lost the gender battle. And we've accepted it into our schools, and we've allowed it to happen. It's been going on for years and years and years. Well, drag queens are teaching our children in story time. Now, I don't know if Idaho has gone to that level, but it's happening all over. And we know that it has happened at some level in Idaho. We didn't stop it. We either didn't stop the public school altogether, or we didn't stop the teachers, or we allowed our children to go there. And so we have to take responsibility. Now let's talk about, let's watch this next video about critical race theory in schools. And this is actually an administrator in a school that's doing most of the talking here. Go ahead.
Tony Kinnett is the science coordinator at the Indianapolis Public Schools District in Indiana, and he's also the founder of Chalkboard Review. You may have seen his video making the rounds on the internet today. In the video, Kinnett responds to claims from Democrats that critical race theory isn't taught in schools. Watch.
We do have critical race theory in how we teach. We tell our teachers to treat students differently based on color. We tell our students that every problem is a result of white men, and that everything Western civilization built is racist. Capitalism as a tool of white supremacy. Those are straight out of Kimberly Crenshaw's main points, verbatim in Critical Race Theory, the writings that formed the movement. This is in math, history, science, English, the arts, and it's not slowing down.
Tony Kinnett joins us now. So you're saying the dodge is, they don't have CRT 101 after math class. But what they do have is the entire CRT infused in every single course and every single classroom throughout the curriculum. Is that right?
Absolutely. There's this very clever trick that a lot of administrators will pull. In education, there are two things that consist of learning. We have curriculum, which is what the students are learning, and then we have pedagogy, which is how it's taught. So we can officially tell parents, we're not teaching critical race theory. It's not in the Indiana academic standards. But all of a sudden, the classroom door shuts and the teacher starts teaching through a lens of this race essentialism that pits students against each other based on their color.
So give some advice to parents out there. Perhaps they don't know if CRT is in the school that their kids are going to. How would they go about discovering it? And if it is infected in the school district there where they live, what's their next step?
Well, the first thing you should really be doing is talking to your kids' teachers. So many of my parents had great conversations with me weekly on what was going on, not just inside my classroom, but inside the school. There is this very interesting myth by the left that all of the teachers are on the left and the right believes it. A lot of teachers really just want to go in and teach, and they are happy to have discussions with parents. However, if you find that a teacher is being uncooperative, they're teaching things that really shouldn't be taught in a classroom, they're treating your kid different based on a color, you have a responsibility to go to the principal, then to the superintendent, and if that doesn't work, you really should look into electing a much better school board that's going to serve your community based on merit, not on color.
What kind of damage to the child's brain does something like CRT do?
Oh, it's horrific. You get into high school courses where a teacher will open things up for discussion. And we see this in English classes a lot. They'll talk about a piece of poetry, they'll talk about something that a writer has brought to bear, and then the teacher will portray it through a societal lens like critical race theory, and then provide this Orwellian 2 minutes of hate. And the students will be expected to talk about things in the essay, or in cases in like Manhattan, students will be expected to say things from home that were brought up in a very racist way. And all of the students are expected to participate in this, to chip in a little bit of progressive ideology. And it gets really sketchy really quickly for a kid that doesn't buy into the rest of the stuff. And
they don't do this in math, do they? They can't bring CRT into math, can they?
Oh, they sure can. They sure can. Ethnomathematics is a huge thing that's coming to Indianapolis public schools. We just had a very large meeting about it, and there's actually a program that's being developed with Indiana University that would analyze how a teacher teaches, analyze the scores of the students, and then determine how racist a teacher is in teaching that math course.
Ethnomathematics. I haven't heard that one before. Thank you so much,
catchy.
Tony. That was eye-opening. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube.
So you see here that even though they might not be calling it critical race theory, they might be not calling it, gender education, they might not be calling it what we think it is being called. We have to be aware of it. We have to be involved in our children's lives. We have to be protecting them. And if we're going to send them to these institutions, which we're going to talk about that in a little bit, then we must be very, very, very involved in what is going on and aware. Now, let's talk about public school expenses. So we've covered the history, we've covered the problems, we've covered what kind of brought us here. Let's talk about some of the realities of public school, which is one of them is expenses. So here is off the government's own website here. This is a pie chart of the general fund revenue and appropriations. So where the money comes from, right? And you can see here that individual income tax, now this is a state, this is the state. This is not talking about property tax that this county collects for your local school districts. This is what the state collects and how they spend it. So you got 44.8% of individual income tax. You got 43.4% of the revenue coming from sales tax, corporate tax 7.1, and other taxes 4.6. Now, this is how it's spent, okay? If you look down here in this little box right here, you'll see that all education is 62.1% and $2.5 billion. Billion, that's a B, right? And that 48.9% of the revenue coming into the state goes to public schools. 228 million goes to other education, and 307 million goes to colleges and universities. And just by a side note, you've got welfare, human and health services at 22.5%. But we're sticking to public schools, so it is extremely, extremely expensive. I mean, it just is. Look at what we collect. Right or wrong. We're going to talk about this in another webinar, but virtual town hall here. But look at that, and then this is how it's spent. And And what are we getting for it? What are we getting for it? Well, let's talk about that. Play video number 4.
This is a story of our children. This is the story of the big yellow bus. This is the story of indoctrination.
6 years ago, we came together to pass the No Child Left Behind Act. And today, no one can deny its results.
Stupid in America. That's a nasty title.
14 countries rank higher on reading ability than the U.S.
And the urgent task of fixing America's failing schools.
A third of our kids are dropping out.
The American education system badly needs improvement.
Just last week, schools got $10 billion in emergency government funding.
But now the shocking video of a school beating caught on tape.
There have been 6 suicides in our school district.
Tampa police are investigating a report of a rape at Jefferson High School.
Okay, let's keep going. So you can see here that I'm exposing myself a little bit because I don't believe government should be in the educational business. Now, the reality is they are, that we're well in it, about $5 billion in the state, unless I'm completely wrong. But you see that the state is collecting $2.5 billion for education, and then the counties are collecting whatever they're collecting per county. We will get that number totaled at some point. But I'm going to explain myself. Why? Why do I not believe that the government should be in the education business? Well, I've talked about it. Because it's the parents' duty to educate, not the state's. Now, many of you are going to say, well, yeah, I understand. I got to go to work, and I understand that too, right? But that we shouldn't use the education system for a babysitting program. We just shouldn't do that. Also, education, when it's in a public setting with the state educating, is less effective. I went through the history of that. We actually have, less results, more people that go through the education system, and that don't know how to read, write, don't know the basics of arithmetic and mathematics and all of those basic education points. And so it's less effective. It's also, as I showed, very expensive. So it puts a great burden upon the people. And it's easy to be corrupted. And the state of Idaho's education system and the United States education system is very, very corrupted. Very, very corrupted. It is the most most powerful bureaucracy, most powerful lobbies, and they'll hate me for this virtual town hall, for saying the things I'm saying. They'll attack me for it. But I believe that we have to speak truth, and I need to, inform you of what I believe, so you can make a decision whether you want to vote for that or not. Now, also, public schools, public education is very easy to infiltrate and control by the wicked. And I've shown you some examples of that. So these are some reasons why I don't believe that the government should be in the education business. Also, it's really, to be honest with you, it's not authorized, especially on a federal level. There is no authorization from the Constitution to have an education department. Okay. So we've talked about lots of the problems. Now let's talk about the solutions. I'm going to be very, very simple here. And then I want to talk to you. I want you to respond. Is that live yet, or are we not going to be able to do that here tonight, Diego? What? We can or we can't? Okay. So we'll do it on the chat. We can't, so we'll do it on chat. Well, I am proposing an 8-year plan to minimize public education by 80%. Whoa, did you hear what I said? Yeah, I'm actually going to say it. I am proposing an 8-year plan to minimize public education by 80%. And that's, I think that's the minimum of what we should minimize. So these are some steps of the plan. Stop all federal funding for education. Free teachers from federal and state curriculums, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in detail. Empower parents to control education funds. I'm also going to talk about that in a little bit. and encourage a free market of private and homeschooling to replace the public. So there it is. It's simple. There's a lot of detail that needs to go on between those. But I am proposing an 8-year plan to minimize public education by 80%. Okay, I don't know how you feel about that. I hope to win you over on that. If you don't feel comfortable about that, or if you're concerned about that, or whatever it might be, again, you see how entrenched public education is in Idaho. I mean, we're spending billions and billions of taxpayers' dollars in order to promote this system. And there are some good things that have happened through public education, but they're definitely not worth the negatives. So now, let's talk a little bit about stopping all federal funds for education. We have a system right now, and it's not just in education, it's in many different ways, but where the federal government takes the money from the people in the state, and then they trickle it down for obedience, right? How do they do that? They say, hey, Emmett School District, we'll give you $1.5 million. That's where I live in Emmett. We'll give you $1.5 million, or we'll give you $3 million or $4 million or whatever else it is. But you have to follow these rules. You have to comply to these things, which is critical race theory and other things, or whatever it might be. And it's been a plethora of things throughout the history of federal funding. But federal funding never comes without strings. And so if we are ever going to free our education system, if we're ever going to get it back the way it needs to be, then we need to eliminate all federal funding for education. And it can be done. I'm going to show you in a different virtual town hall how we could cut all federal fundings in our state and be well off. And I'll show you the actual numbers, the actual taxes, the actual what they're going to, what we eliminate so that we can be more free, so that we don't have to be dependent on the federal government. Yeah, it might mean that we go without a huge welfare program, or we minimize the size of our education system, but it means that we'll be free and we don't have to be attached with strings to the federal government. Okay, second, freeing teachers from the federal and state curriculum and empowering parents to control education funds. They go together, because what we must do in our public schools is we must apply more free principles of free market. So the one side of that is we have to free the teachers and the administrators up to be able to teach the way they want to teach, to be able to not be controlled by the federal government or by a state curriculum. We have to free them up so that so the good teachers can teach great things. The good school districts can do good things. They can really apply the things they want to apply without being under the control of the federal government, Department of Education on a state or a federal level. And then we have to empower parents to control the educational funds. And I compare this to like having a whole bunch of hamburger shops. Okay, so hear me out on this. Let's say you live in a town and there's 10 places that make hamburgers. Well, what if all the hamburger shops bought their hamburger from the same place, bought their buns, their condiments, all their supplies? They had to buy them all from the same place. They had to charge the same exact price. They had to make the hamburgers the same way. They had to hire the employees the very same way. They had to build their buildings the same way, and they had to sell it and give you service the exact same ways. What's going to happen? What kind of hamburger are you going to get? Right? Put it in the chat. What kind of hamburger are you going to get? Right? Yeah, you might get an okay hamburger, maybe. Depends on how good the rules are, right? How good the curriculum is. Yeah, you're going to get a boring hamburger. Yeah, that's what Holly says. Oren says the same everywhere. That's right. Anywhere you go, you're going to get the same hamburger. So it doesn't matter if you got money or not. It doesn't matter where you go. It's the same price, the same hamburger. It's boring. It's, and there's no incentive to make it better. There's no business person there to care because it's all the same thing. Remember, I'm comparing this to our schools. So if we have federal and state control, just controlling and literally strangling our teachers and strangling our school administrators and our school boards, we're not going to have a very good product. It's all going to be controlled, right? And it doesn't matter if the parents are controlling the funds or not. No matter where they go, they're going to get the same terrible, boring hamburger filled with terrible education. Or maybe it's not terrible education. Maybe it's okay education or boring education, but they're going to get that, right? Okay, so then we have, let me go to this one because you need to see me, I guess. So now on the other side of that, we have to make it so that the parents have full control of the funds that are allotted for their student, for their child. So that it really means something if a parent says, I'm going to pull my kids out of that school because they're doing this or they're doing that. I don't like that. They're not making a good hamburger. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go where they're making a good hamburger, where this teacher or this administrator, this school board are making a good hamburger. I'm going to go there because I want my child's education to be good. And all of a sudden what you have now is a little bit of a free market applied, and you're going to have teachers and administrators starting to ship shape. They're going to start responding to the parents when they come to the school board meetings. They're not going to be calling the police and dragging the parents out of the school board meetings. I could promise you that, like what's been happening all over the country. Why? Because when that parent takes their child out, there's actually a decrease in funding. And when that parent rallies other parents and they all take their kids out of school, then that is a true decrease in funding. Because what's happening right now in Idaho is this, and many people don't know this, that it wouldn't matter if 50, 60, 70% of the parents took their kids out of school. That school will only receive a 3% decrease in budget the next year. Did you hear me? So there is no penalty, and that is why our teachers are getting so frustrated, our parents are getting so frustrated because there is no accountability, even if they take their kids out of school, which I believe is the right thing to do in that situation. But there is no accountability to the teachers, the administrators, or the school board, because they still get funding and it can only be decreased by 3%. That makes sense? Does that kind of explain why what we've been experiencing in the school boards and our, with our teachers and our administrators? They don't really care. But man, if you match it up with freeing the teachers up, freeing the administrators and the school boards up, and then empowering the parents to control the education funds directly, then all of a sudden now you've got the capability that if they're starting to teach critical race theory in their schools and parents start pulling their kids out because they don't like it, then all of a sudden now they change their tone. Either that or that school literally won't get any funding, or it'll minimize in funding until they change their ways. And that is what needs to happen. It has to happen both by freeing the teachers up so that we can have the possibility of actually better education in our socialist education system, and empowering parents. Now, of course, throughout this process, we want to encourage free market in private schools and in homeschools, because the more free market we have and the more we can replace public schools, the less expensive it is for us, and also the better education we have. That's just a proven fact. And so those are my solutions. I wish I could bring you on. We will get this repaired. We had several technical difficulties. I wanted to bring you up so we could actually talk. But let's talk here in the chat. Give me some of your thoughts, or give me, let's just go with what your concerns. But you have to, let's see, after the 80% reduction, then abolish it. That was from Wendy. Mark says, according to some, the roads are racist. Work hard is racist. Delayed gratification and free market is racist. Yeah, that is actually being taught. That somehow our roads are racist because they were built, I don't know, by white men, I guess. I don't know. Smaller schools might end the unions also. Oh, man. The school unions are tremendous in Idaho and all over. And they're not going to be a friend to me. I don't expect many of them to vote for me. They're going to campaign against me. And that is why we have to have this movement of people, which we are seeing, support me so that we can just balance this huge power of basically government employees that's in Idaho. Okay, Nicholas says, how do parents control school choice if revenue is generated through sales tax? Oh, that's a good question. But I am going to go into that in much, much more detail. As you know, I'm planning on eliminating property tax and replacing it with a consumption tax. I am planning on eliminating income tax, and that is not an irresponsible thing to do. I will show you how we don't need it in the state of Idaho. I will show you at a different time. I don't have time tonight. Okay, there's several things. The need to raise the cap on charter schools and stop paying taxes for schools. Jeremy says we need to end public sector unions or stop them from buying elected officials. Absolutely. The teachers union lobbyists are deplorable. Don't you think this capture of educational system is an orchestrated event? Well, yeah. Yeah, absolutely it is. The wicked have infiltrated our school systems because we've allowed them to, because we've taken our eye off them, and because the government has pretty much enforced it on us. And that's one of the dangers of public school. Great question. Let's see. Sarah says government needs to get out of all our rights. I agree. Jason says, how can we stop the unions? Real question. Well, the only way, again, to stop the unions is for the people to rise up enough that they basically take care of these problems where the unions are controlling and lobbying and buying our elected representatives. Well, one way, is just come out and open, resistance against them, but also finding people who will go in government and fight them and actually minimize their power. That's what I've been saying I am going to do. I am going to go into the halls of government, and I'm going to strip the power that these people have been holding for a long, long time and restore it back to the people, back to parents, back to the legislature, back to the people's representative, back to families, and back to individuals. That's what we're going to do. That's what we have to do. These things will destroy us and have made us more like Oregon, more like Washington, California than Idaho. That's why we need to keep Idaho. Okay, I know I'm missing a whole bunch here. There's a ton of questions. So Shannon says, what can the government do about incentivizing COVID cases and COVID testing? I'm a nurse and see how monetary gain is corrupting the medical industry. Well, that's a little off topic. I'd love to talk to you more about that, but it is related a little bit to what we've been discussing here today, because we are just seeing how basically money is controlling all the institutions of government, and sometimes it's outside of government, sometimes it's inside a government. These bureaucracies in the agency, the executive agency, have really run amok. And last night I was talking to a friend who has spent a lot of time in government. She's in the legislature. And she was talking about, I think she said 22 or 23 agencies in Idaho government are constitutional. So there's 22 to 23 agencies in Idaho state government that are constitutional. However, there's like 260 agencies. Imagine that. And they just keep growing and growing and growing, and every governor creates more agencies, and they get people that they like to fill those seats, and then they become a big jobs program. So it's very connected. Okay. Let's see, Jason. Let's see. John, how are you going to keep from splitting the vote in the primary? Oh, that's a great question. I love that question. So, I get this quite a bit because there's several candidates running in the race. I want to do a little math with you, and I don't want to change focus completely off of education because that's the point here. But can anybody tell me how many votes Brad Little got in the primaries? Just put it in the chat. Yeah, there's 40%, 38%. I want to know the numbers. How many people voted for Brad Little in the primaries? Okay, Nicholas says 72,000. That's really close. It's actually 73,000. Think about that. Raul Labrador had 68,000. Tommy Alquist had 52,000. Give or take a little bit of change there. Now, how many people live in Idaho? There's about 1.8 million people live in Idaho. We have almost 1 million people registered voters. The majority of them, there's 136,000 registered Democrats. There's 500-something thousand Republicans, 307,000 unaffiliated voters, and another 20 to 25,000 constitutional and independent party voters. Okay? So that's how it all adds up. And I only need 72,000. Well, let's say he increased a little bit, which I don't know if Brad Little's going to increase that number or not. I don't actually think he will, but let's say even if he does. So he gets into the 80,000 range, right? Well, just in the northern area of Idaho, just the panhandle, there's about just the tip of Idaho, there's 124,000 conservative voters up there. And that would be, a combination of these parties, but not the Democrats. 124,000. Well, guess what? If I just worked there and got those votes, I win the primary. Also, let's go out to Preston area, the rural corner of Idaho, right? Clear over in the southeast corner of Idaho. Well, there's 68,000 people, conservative voters, just in that area. Okay? So I think I want to, express to you how our goal and our job as running a campaign is to get these people to vote. To come and vote in May, not in November. If you vote in November for the governor, you already lost your voice. You have to vote in the primary in May. You have to register as a Republican and vote for me, or vote for whoever you want. Right? And it is my job to get 90 to 120 to 130,000 people to vote for me in the primaries in May. I'm not worried about how many Janice McGeehan might get. She'll get some, right? Her campaign doesn't seem like it's doing very well. She did get a Trump endorsement, I think. But she's not getting momentum. She's losing momentum. My job is to get 100,000 plus voters to vote for me in the primaries. I'm not worried about splitting a vote. It's not a pie anymore. Also, I forgot another group of people. We've got almost 200,000, about 100 and almost 50,000 new voters that have come from out of state, mostly from California. And those people, if they've come over the last year and a half, they are ultra aware of what happened to the other states. And most of them are very aware about not having to have someone really stand up in government to protect from what's happened in their state. They are also going to be very friendly to me, and we've already seen it all over the state. And that's a group of people of 150,000. So again, can you see now why I'm not so concerned about this splitting the vote thing? I am going out and meeting with people every night. We're having meet and greet town halls. We're having these, rallies and events. By the way, this Thursday we're having a old time barn dance in Star. And if you go to the news at votebundy.com, you can buy tickets there and come and join. We're going to have 300 plus people there. It's going to be a blast. That's what we're doing. We're reaching people all over the state. And I'm not concerned about splitting a vote, because my job is to get enough people out of the woodwork to come and vote for me in the primaries in May. And I believe that we can do it. I believe we are doing it, and I believe we'll continue to do it as we go on into the next year and into May. So thanks for that question. Okay, I'm going to stick to education questions. Okay. Yeah, so there was a question, again, barn dance this Thursday, old time barn dance this Thursday in Star. And you can purchase tickets at votebundy.com if you go to the news and click on that article. Okay, so yeah, someone says, Christian says, Trump wants someone who will blow to his needs, and it isn't Ammon. I'm sure Janice traveled far. Yeah, I don't really know how that happened. I'm glad that she got that. I think it'll, Now, let me, again, I was going to stick to education, and now I'm not. So I wanted to say something about this. The fact that we have three conservatives, if you want, main conservatives, and others in the primaries, it's actually a good thing. Because what's happening is these people, for the most part, in their own way, whether they're really strong on principles of freedom or not, but in their own way, they're going out all over the state, and they're actually educating people on at least some conservative principles. And so we have, 6, 7, 8 candidates who are claiming to be conservative, and they're going around the state meeting with people, and the people are getting some education on at least some conservative principles. So it's doing a lot of good. It's doing a lot of good. Now, obviously, one has to rise to the top, and I've talked about that. I want to go into detail, but the fact that Janice can get a little momentum off of Trump's endorsement is probably a good thing for the short term, because her campaign will keep going. Maybe it'll get a little more momentum. Maybe it'll gain a little bit of traction, and she could hopefully use that to educate some of the people of Idaho about some conservative principles, because she's not all government. She does teach some conservative principles. At least she espouses them. Okay, so anyway, let's go on. So let's get into education. Questions about education. Man, there's a bunch of questions here. I wish I could read faster. Okay. Education question. Okay, critical race. Can you pass laws to stop critical race theory, at least to stop the forward progression of it? That was from Jeremy. Okay, Jeremy, I appreciate that question, but I think the right way to stop it is through free market principles. Not through legislation, not through government force, not through, restricting the teachers from being able to do anything in their classroom. I don't believe that's the right answer. I think you got to free them up and then let the parents hold them accountable through controlling the money. And that's what I was explaining earlier. Because what happens is if the legislature passes a law that they or some bureaucracy gets to control exactly what the teachers say and don't say in a classroom. What happens when wicked people get in control of our legislature or in control of the bureaucracy that controls the teachers? What happens? Then all of a sudden now, by the force of law, they have to teach what these wicked bureaucrats are forcing the teachers to teach. Do you see the danger? And the free market is much better. The legislature probably isn't going to get it right, And if they do get it right, the bureaucrats will just manipulate it to interpret it however they want to. So the answer is not more government force. The answer is applying free principle market in our public schools while we minimize their influence. Thank you for that question. Okay, what would you ban CRT and child grooming in the classroom? I think I just explained that, right? I would let parents ban it. And how do you let parents ban it? You put them in charge of the money, right? It's very simple. That's how you get it right. You have a rhino legislature and allow woke education. How will you change that? I think I just explained it. Okay. Priscilla Giddings is Lieutenant Governor and Ammon Governor. Wow, Idaho would be free again. I agree. I love Priscilla Giddings and what she stands for. I'm grateful that she's willing to fight these wicked people. And who is she running against? She's running against one of the most corrupt people in the state, Scott Bedke. Now, I mean, he is. I have watched Scott Bedke under oath, and we're getting to the point where we've got to wrap this up, under oath in the Idaho District Court lie. Completely factually lie, and in front of his other legislators that knew, and people that knew without doubt that he was lying. And she's running against him, and he's the Speaker of the House, so he controls the Ethics Committee. And guess what he's doing to Priscilla Giddings? He's using the Ethics Committee to try to attack Priscilla Giddings because she is running against him for Lieutenant Governor. What is Bedke and Little's plans? Well, the plan is that Little goes for another 4 years as governor. Bedke this round becomes the lieutenant governor, and then in 4 years he becomes the governor. They want to control the state of Idaho for many, many, many more years. And we must crack that. We must break that, or Idaho will become Oregon. It will become Oregon. It'll become Washington. It'll become what California has become, Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado. We are following those same steps. And who is leading us in there? Governor Little and Scott Bedke. So I want to thank you for your time. It's a little past 8:45 here. We need to wrap this up. I really am grateful for you. I'm grateful for your participation, for your support. I hope that we'll clean this up a little bit. We've had some technical difficulties. We'll clean it up a little bit. It'll be it'll be available if you go to votebuddy.com and you go to events and the Virtual Townhall. And the one we did last month is there, and this one will be available there. You can click the link and send it to your friends, pass it all around. Let's get this truth out, and then we will have another one next month. We'll announce it. And it's interesting because last Virtual Town Hall there was a ton of people, and there's even more this time. And so we'll keep growing and influencing people all over the state, all over the country, and we'll push the Keep Idaho plan and liberty until we fully attain it. So thank you for your time. Thank you.
If you want to make a change, then vote Bundy today. Vote for Bundy. You gotta do what's right.
Ammon Bundy for governor.